Hey everybody, and welcome back to Sip and Talk.
Good to be here.
Today we're diving into a question that is, well, it's absolutely central to global geopolitics right now. But it's one where the commonly cited reasons might not tell the whole story.
Ah, you mean China and Taiwan?
Exactly. We're talking about China's complex, really persistent pursuit of Taiwan.
Right, it's a topic constantly in the news, isn't it? Usually framed in terms of, historical claims or strategic military positioning.
Yeah. We often hear about the Chinese Civil War, the first island chain, or Taiwan's critical role in the semiconductor industry. All important, no doubt.
For sure.
But we recently received some input, actually, that offered a different perspective, a really interesting one, suggesting a potentially deeper, maybe more fundamental driver at play.
Oh, what kind of perspective?
Well, this input highlighted the idea that perhaps the real core motivation for Beijing's push for unification isn't just about territory or nationalist ambition, but a profound internal fear. The fear that their own people, mainland Chinese citizens, might look across the Taiwan Strait, see Taiwan's thriving democracy, and start asking questions.
I see where this is going. Questions that could pose an existential threat to their authoritarian rule.
Exactly. And that perspective, I think, is incredibly compelling. It shifts the focus a bit, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Away from just the external dynamics, military economics.
And shines a light right on the internal vulnerabilities of the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP.
Yeah.
It suggests the battle might be as much for the hearts and minds of people on the mainland as it is for the island itself.
Right. If Taiwan represents a successful alternative political system within the Chinese cultural sphere,
then that success itself is a powerful challenge to the CCP's whole narrative. Their claim that only their system can deliver stability and prosperity for Chinese people.
So our mission in this deep dive is to unpack this specific perspective, to see how it intertwines with those other more commonly discussed motivations, history, strategy, economics.
And to explore what the information we've gathered tells us about the true dynamics driving Beijing's actions towards Taiwan. It's about looking beyond the headlines, maybe, and understanding the complex layers beneath.
Okay, let's unpack this complex situation then.
Where should we start?
Well, to really grasp the potential significance of this idea that the fear of democracy is the central driving force we probably first need to lay the groundwork, we should look at the other key reasons that are frequently cited for China's desire to unify with Taiwan, based on what we know.
Right, the foundational, widely acknowledged drivers, sort of the standard explanations.
Exactly. Think of these as the baseline. And where does that baseline usually start? History, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And perhaps the most often cited reason, the one that starts nearly every discussion, is this claim of historical legitimacy tied directly to the Chinese Civil War.
Okay.
The narrative really begins, at the end of that conflict in 1949. The Communist Party establishes the People's Republic of China, the PRC, on the mainland.
And the other side.
The Kuomintang, or KMT, the opposing side, they retreated to the island of Taiwan. And there, they continued the government of the Republic of China, the ROC.
So from Beijing's perspective, the CCP's perspective, that war wasn't actually finished.
Not completely. Because the ROC government still exists on Taiwan, it has its own institutions, elected officials, a functioning state apparatus, even though Taiwan has transitioned into this multi-party democracy. And let's be honest, the ROC's international recognition as the government of all of China has pretty much faded.
Right.
Its continued existence directly challenges the CCP's fundamental claim, their claim to be the sole legitimate government of all of China.
It's like a constant reminder that their victory wasn't total.
Precisely. Beijing frames the unification with Taiwan as the completion of this unfinished revolutionary task.
Yeah.
For the CCP leadership, integrating Taiwan isn't just about regaining territory lost during, a chaotic historical period.
It's more fundamental.
It's seen as absolutely crucial for reinforcing their historical narrative and cementing their legitimacy, especially in the eyes of their own people. It's tied directly to their long-term goal of national rejuvenation, this grand vision of restoring China to its historical position of power and influence.
And if they haven't unified the entire territory they claim as China,
that vision is incomplete. It leaves a rift, as some describe it, in their carefully constructed historical narrative, and that rift could potentially challenge their authority.
It's deeply symbolic then. It's like they can't truly claim ultimate victory as long as the flag of the side they defeated is still flying just off the coast. It's tied to their very right to rule, in their view.
That's a core element of their motivation, definitely. They feel they need to close that historical chapter definitively.
Okay, so that's the historical angle. Beyond that narrative, Taiwan's physical location is a massive factor too, isn't it? There's significant geostrategic and military significance to controlling that island.
Oh, absolutely massive. You just have to look at a map. Taiwan sits squarely in the middle of what strategists call the first island chain.
The first island chain. Explain that a bit.
It's basically a string of archipelagos running along the coast of East Asia. It starts up near Japan, runs down through the Ryukyu Islands, includes Taiwan, then the Philippines, and extends out towards Borneo.
And for China, this chain acts as a kind of barrier, right?
Yeah.
To accessing the wider ocean.
Exactly. From Beijing's perspective, the first island chain, which is reinforced by alliances between the United States and regional partners like Japan, South Korea, the Philippines, it acts as a strategic containment line.
Containing what?
Containing their ability, specifically the ability of China's Navy, the plan, to operate freely in the deep waters of the Pacific Ocean. Controlling Taiwan would allow China to break through this chain.
Like opening a gate.
Essentially, yeah. Opening up a clear path for their military and commercial vessels to access the open Pacific, bypassing choke points to the north near Japan and south near the Philippines.
Wow. Okay, that has huge implications for regional power dynamics. And the existing international order, really. Massive
implications. Gaining that unrestricted access to the Pacific would significantly enhance China's power projection capabilities. Think about it. It would challenge the long-standing influence of the United States and its allies in the Western Pacific.
And militarily.
Militarily, controlling Taiwan would strengthen China's strategic position in the contested waters of the South China Sea and the East China Sea. It makes their footprint much larger. And importantly, it would make it considerably more difficult and more costly for the United States to come to the defense of allies like Japan or the Philippines in a regional conflict. It effectively pushes U.S. influence further back into the Pacific.
So Taiwan's geographic position makes it an irreplaceable strategic asset. It's not just about the island itself, but the key it represents to unlocking broader maritime power and, frankly, challenging U.S. dominance in the Pacific.
Precisely. It's a absolutely pivotal piece on the geopolitical chessboard.
Okay. History, strategy.
Yeah.
And then there's the undeniable economic and technological motivation. We constantly hear about Taiwan's dominance in the semiconductor industry.
Yeah, and this is arguably one of the most immediate and tangible incentives for Beijing. Taiwan is an absolute titan in the global tech supply chain, especially for the advanced semiconductors.
The really high-end chips.
Exactly, the ones you need for everything. It's home to companies like TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, which produces the most advanced, most crucial chips used in, well, everything from the latest smartphones and AI processors to critical military hardware.
And China's own technological ambitions. They're heavily reliant on these advanced chips, aren't they?
Critically reliant. Despite pouring massive investment into its domestic chip industry, China remains highly dependent on foreign technology and manufacturing for these advanced semiconductors. Some reports suggest China relies on imports or foreign-owned factories within China for over 90% of its total semiconductor needs.
90%.
Yeah, and specifically for Taiwan, nearly half of China's semiconductor imports reportedly come just from that island.
So taking Taiwan would mean potentially gaining control over the world's most advanced chip manufacturing capabilities. Just like that.
That's the strategic prize, isn't it? Gaining control over TSMC and other Taiwanese chip manufacturers would dramatically accelerate China's goal of technological self-sufficiency.
Which is especially important now, with the tech competition heating up.
Absolutely critical, especially in the context of the escalating tech war, particularly with the United States, which has been implementing export controls and sanctions aimed specifically at limiting China's access to advanced chip technology.
So for Beijing,
acquiring Taiwan's chip industry isn't just about economic benefit, though that's huge. It's about national security, achieving technological dominance, and gaining control over a major bottleneck in the global digital economy. It's like gaining control of the vital organs of the global tech body.
It's less about the land itself and more about the high-tech factories and, crucially, the expertise on that land.
Exactly. It's strategic industrial policy wrapped up in a geopolitical ambition.
Okay, so we've got the historical narrative and legitimacy, the crucial geostrategic location and military projection, and the immense economic and technological prize. What about domestic factors? How does the issue of Taiwan play into the CCP's need to maintain control within China?
Right. This is where the external goal intersects directly with internal political needs. And it's a powerful connection. The issue of Taiwan is a potent and frequently used tool for domestic nationalism, for rallying public support for the CCP.
How so?
Well, when the party faces internal challenges, and let's face it, they do, whether it's a slowing economy, rising unemployment, environmental protests, social unrest, whatever it might be, they can leverage the goal of unification to distract the population.
Ah, the classic deflection tactic, rally around the flag.
Precisely. The state media, the propaganda apparatus, they can highlight the unresolved issue of Taiwan, frame it as a national grievance or an imminent patriotic task that must be achieved. And they portray the CCP leadership as strong, determined, focused on restoring national glory.
Makes them look indispensable.
Exactly. It's a way to stir up nationalist sentiment, unite people behind a common external goal, and crucially, divert attention from internal problems. It consolidates the party's power by making them appear as the indispensable guardian of national interests, the only ones who can achieve this great national task. It reinforces their image as the strong leader steering the nation towards its destiny.
So it's a useful lever for the CCP to pull whenever they feel internal pressure building up.
It really is. It ties their legitimacy in the eyes of many to the achievement of this widely popular nationalist goal, at least among certain segments of the population.
Okay, so those are the major, well-known reasons we always hear about when we talk about China and Taiwan. The historical legacy, the strategic military advantage, the economic and tech ambition, and the domestic political utility. They're all significant pieces of the puzzle.
They absolutely are, and they're all valid factors based on Beijing's stated objectives and its observable actions. You can see evidence for all of them.
Here's where it gets really interesting, and where that core insight we received earlier comes back into play.
The democracy angle.
Exactly. What if, underneath all these practical or historical reasons, the land, the location, the factories, the most profound, maybe even existential threat Taiwan poses to the CCP isn't any of those things?
But the very nature of its society.
Yes. This is the perspective that suggests the CCP's deepest fear is the existence of Taiwan as a successful, thriving, democratic state.
Okay, let's explore that. What makes Taiwan such a potent democratic counterpoint in the eyes of the CCP? Why is that so threatening?
Well, the information we looked at highlights Taiwan as arguably the most mature democracy in the Chinese-speaking world.
Right. Unlike the mainland, it operates with fundamental political freedoms and institutions that are just completely absent under the CCP's rule.
Like what specifically?
Well, think about it. Taiwan holds free and fair multi-party elections, where citizens genuinely get to choose their leaders. You see peaceful transfers of power between different political parties based on election results, something unimaginable on the mainland.
And day-to-day freedoms.
People enjoy significant freedom of speech, freedom of the press. They have the right to protest, to criticize the government, without the immediate fear of arbitrary arrest or severe punishment that hangs over people on the mainland.
Which, as you said, stands in complete, stark opposition to the reality under the CCP.
An absolute contrast. On the mainland, the CCP maintains rigid control over information, over political expression, over civil society. Dissent is ruthlessly suppressed. The very concept of choosing your own leaders or openly criticizing the party is strictly forbidden and dangerous.
So, the fear isn't just that Taiwan exists as a separate entity.
It's that it exists as a successful, free society that shares cultural roots with the mainland. That seems to be the core of the perceived existential threat.
It's the potential threat of example.
Exactly that phrase.
Yeah.
The deep-seated fear in Beijing, it seems, is that mainland Chinese citizens who share a cultural background, language, history with Taiwanese people might see Taiwan's freedoms and its prosperity under a democratic system.
And start thinking.
Hey, wait a minute. They might begin to yearn for something similar themselves. The idea that if people like them, people from a similar cultural background can live with civil liberties, can participate in elections, can hold their government accountable, well, why can't we?
It's the possibility of that idea spreading, of democratic aspirations actually taking root within mainland China itself.
That's what they fear. This potential for a desire for democratic rights to spread across the strait is viewed by the CCP, according to this perspective, as a fundamental threat, something that could genuinely shake the foundations of their one-party authoritarian rule.
It's not just a political difference, it's seen as an ideological contagion.
Yes, and the language used in some sources to describe this fear is incredibly vivid. Terms like Taiwan being a dangerous sample effect, or even a kind of democratic speech flu.
Wow, democratic speech flow. That really conveys how they might see it, like a disease of thought they need to quarantine.
It really underscores the level of perceived threat, doesn't it? It suggests the CCP leadership might operate with a kind of can't let you live better or freer than me mentality when it comes to Taiwan's democratic success.
Because it challenges their narrative.
It directly challenges the narrative that their authoritarian system is the only viable or superior way to govern Chinese people. Why would anyone need democracy if our system is truly the best and provides everything people want? Taiwan's success inherently questions that premise.
And their actions in Hong Kong. Surely that's amplified this fear for Taiwan, hasn't it? Hong Kong was supposed to be the showcase for one country, two systems.
Oh, absolutely. Hong Kong was explicitly presented as the model. You know, a territory with a high degree of autonomy, integrated with the mainland, but keeping its own system. It was meant to entice Taiwan, to show them, look, you can keep your way of life under Beijing's sovereignty.
But that's not how it played out.
Not at all. Instead, what's happened in Hong Kong, especially since the imposition of the national security law and the sweeping crackdown on democratic movements, well, one description called it an exhibition accident site.
An exhibition accident.
Yeah.
That's a pretty stark way to put it.
It is, isn't it? The erosion of promised freedoms, the dismantling of democratic institutions, the suppression of dissent, it all serves as a glaring, unavoidable warning to Taiwan. It completely destroys any credibility Beijing might have had left in offering the one country, two systems framework as a viable future for Taiwan.
Look, Taiwanese people see what happened there. They see the crackdown, the arrests, the loss of freedoms.
Right. Watching Hong Kong reinforces for Taiwanese citizens, and again, potentially for anyone on the mainland who manages to get uncensored information about it, that the CCP's promises regarding autonomy and freedoms within their system are, well, unreliable, maybe even worthless.
There is that analogy.
Yeah, the one description put it with a bit of dark humor. It's like being promised you won't be hit, and then you look over and see your neighbor who was promised the exact same thing has a swollen face. Who would trust that promise now?
Yeah, that paints a very clear picture.
It makes the democratic alternative flourishing in Taiwan even more appealing by comparison, and it makes the idea of unification under Beijing's terms utterly unpalatable for most Taiwanese.
It really underscores why Taiwan's democracy is such a powerful counterexample.
It does. So if this perceived threat of a successful democratic model is so significant, then a major motivation for the CCP becomes the need to basically eliminate the existence of this model.
Not just gain sovereignty over the island,
but to absorb Taiwan and dismantle its democratic system.
Yep.
To get rid of the alternative.
To remove the living proof that another system works, and maybe works better, for people with a shared cultural background.
Exactly. It's about removing a powerful, living example within the Chinese cultural sphere that directly contradicts the CCP's core narrative and could potentially inspire democratic aspirations among their own population. And this seems to be a central, perhaps even the most critical driver behind their intense focus on Taiwan.
Okay, so if this deep-seated fear of Taiwan's democratic example is such a significant motivation, how does China actually act on it? What specific strategies and tactics do they employ, based on the information we have, to counter this perceived threat, particularly targeting the democratic system itself?
Well, as we touched on, it's a really multifaceted strategy. It's definitely not solely military, although military pressure is a constant and very visible tool. The overall approach seems designed to weaken Taiwan internally and externally, and crucially, to undermine the appeal and the stability of its democracy.
Right. Let's start with the military pressure then, since that's often what grabs the headlines.
Okay. Beijing employs regular, often large-scale military exercises in the waters and airspace surrounding Taiwan. We've seen major operations like the ones dubbed Joint Sword 2024A and 2024B, which explicitly simulated attacks and blockades of the island.
Those were big ones.
They were. But beyond those big exercises, there are near-daily incursions by CCP military aircraft fighters, bombers, reconnaissance planes into Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone, the ADIZ.
Near daily.
Yeah, the sheer volume of these incursions has increased dramatically in recent years. Sources point out that the number of CCP warplane incursions reportedly doubled in 2022 compared to 2021, and that trend of high activity has continued.
Doubling the incursions, that's not just routine training. That sounds like a deliberate strategy.
Oh, absolutely deliberate. The goal isn't necessarily to launch an immediate invasion every single time, though that possibility always looms in the background. A major purpose is clearly to wear down Taiwan's Air Force and Navy, forcing them to scramble jets and ships constantly, burning fuel, putting wear and tear on equipment and personnel.
Exhausting them.
Exactly. It also serves to normalize military activity in the area, gradually shifting the baseline of what's considered normal. And critically, it's psychological warfare aimed directly at the Taiwanese population. It creates a sense of constant threat, insecurity, instability around their daily lives, and, implicitly, around their democratic system.
And it sends signals internationally, too.
Oh, sure. It signals military resolve to Taiwan's international partners, particularly warning them against intervention. There was that point about China having to consider the risk that attacking Taiwan might wake up the whole NATO friend circle,
Nice.
meaning it could provoke a collective security response from NATO allies or other democratic partners. That highlights the potential international military challenges they face if they escalate too far.
So the military actions are as much about psychology, signaling, and wearing down resolve as they are about actual physical readiness for invasion.
Very much so. And alongside that military pressure, they engage in really sophisticated information warfare and political manipulation within Taiwan.
How do they do that specifically? To undermine the democratic process itself.
It's a pretty comprehensive effort, based on reports. Tactics include creating and disseminating fake public opinion polls designed specifically to mislead voters and maybe influence election outcomes. Sources mention individuals being investigated for involvement in spreading exactly these kinds of fake polls ahead of Taiwan's 2024 presidential and legislative elections.
Trying to shape perceptions right before people vote.
Precisely. They've also reportedly used illegal online gambling platforms, often linked back to mainland China, as channels to maybe transfer funds or influence election results by targeting specific groups of voters.
Gambling platforms, how does that work?
It's complex, but potentially involves using payouts or targeted advertising on those platforms to sway opinions or even funnel money illicitly. And increasingly, they're leveraging advanced technology, deploying AI, for instance, to generate online propaganda much more efficiently, manipulating candidate statements, creating deepfake videos to discredit opponents, and launching targeted partisan attacks on social media to sow division and chaos.
So they're actively trying to pollute the information environment and really mess with Taiwan's elections.
That seems to be the goal, to create distrust in the democratic process itself, make it look chaotic or unreliable, and promote narratives that are favorable to Beijing's agenda.
And supporting groups within Taiwan.
Yes, they also actively support pro-unification parties and various groups in Taiwan. This support can apparently involve using illegal financing channels. There have even been reported instances of collaboration with criminal organizations like triads for activities such as instigating violent protests aimed at destabilizing society.
Wow, potentially working with organized crime.
That's what investigations suggest. For example, there were investigations into suspicious Chinese funds potentially influencing Taiwan's 2018 local elections, which highlighted this risk.
So it goes way beyond just propaganda. It includes covert funding and potentially even orchestrating disruptions on the ground.
That's what the information points towards. And the cognitive warfare tactics themselves seem to be evolving. Initially, it might have been more overt, wolf warrior style aggression and direct threats.
Right.
Now, it seems to be shifting towards more subtly packaged pro-Taiwan disinformation. Stuff that's harder to immediately identify as coming from an external hostile source.
Making it seem like it's organic criticism from within Taiwan.
Exactly. This type of information warfare is specifically designed to exploit existing societal divisions within Taiwan. And there are divisions, like in any democracy, turn citizens against each other and ultimately undermine trust in their own democratic institutions. Make the whole democratic model look dysfunctional or corrupt from the inside out.
That sounds incredibly insidious. Using Taiwan's own freedoms, freedom of speech, open media against it.
It's a key part of the strategy. Then, of course, there are the cyber and economic tactics.
How are those used to target the democratic system or put pressure on Taiwan?
Well, Beijing targets Taiwan's critical infrastructure relentlessly. Its financial systems, energy grid, communication networks all are subject to persistent cyber attacks. This has been termed networked economic warfare.
Networked economic warfare.
Yeah. These attacks aren't just about causing disruption, though they can do that. They often involve stealing intellectual property, gathering sensitive intelligence, and sometimes planting malware that could potentially be activated during a crisis to cripple key systems.
How bad is it?
The scale is significant. Reports indicate that cyber attacks against, say, Taiwan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs increased by something like 40 times between 2018 and 2020 alone.
40 times more cyber attacks. That's an intense level of digital pressure.
It really highlights the scale of the threat they face constantly. Economically, they use a combination of carrots and sticks.
How does that work?
They might offer investment or tourism incentives to specific localities or businesses in Taiwan that demonstrate support for the 1992 consensus. That's Beijing's preferred framework, the one acknowledging one China but with differing interpretations.
So reward those who align politically.
Right. And at the same time, they impose economic sanctions, trade restrictions, or boycotts on areas, industries, or even specific agricultural products associated with the ruling party in Taiwan, the DPP, or other pro-sovereignty stances.
So they use their significant economic power to reward political alignment and punish dissent. It's economic coercion.
Precisely. It's about leveraging Taiwan's economic dependency on the mainland market to exert political pressure and try to create internal divisions within Taiwan. Make people choose between their economic well-being and their political preferences.
Okay, beyond those specific tactics, military, infowar, cyber, economic set, what are some of the broader efforts they use to try and control the narrative and isolate Taiwan?
Well, a major or long-standing strategy is diplomatic isolation. Beijing aggressively works to reduce the number of countries that maintain formal diplomatic relations with Taiwan. They constantly pressure nations, often using economic incentives or political leverage, to switch recognition from Taipei to Beijing.
How successful have they been?
Pretty successful over the long term. This effort systematically limits Taiwan's international space, reduces its participation in international organizations like the WHO, and attempts to portray Taiwan as an illegitimate or insignificant entity on the global stage. Currently, only a very small handful of countries, mostly smaller nations, formally recognize Taiwan.
Trying to essentially make Taiwan disappear from the world map, diplomatically speaking.
Effectively, yes. They also engage in a long-term effort to influence Taiwanese society itself, particularly targeting the youth. This involves offering various incentive programs, often referred to by names like the 31 Measures and 26 Measures. These provide preferential treatment for young Taiwanese to study, work, or start businesses on the mainland.
Trying to win hearts and minds.
That's the idea. And this is often coupled with promoting negative narratives about Taiwan itself back home, sometimes using phrases like the isolated island theory, suggesting Taiwan is small, provincial, somehow irrelevant without unification. And during these exchanges and programs, they subtly, or sometimes not so subtly, try to instill pro-unification ideology.
Trying to sway the next generation's perspective from a young age. A long game.
It's definitely a soft power approach aimed at long-term influence. Alongside that, they maintain a very hardline legal and rhetorical stance.
Like the anti-secession law.
Exactly. The 2005 anti-secession law explicitly states that China can use non-peaceful means, meaning military force against Taiwan if it formally declares independence, or if they perceive that possibilities for peaceful unification are exhausted, which could include significant delays. This law basically codifies the threat of force into their legal framework.
Providing a justification, in their view.
Right. And publicly, their rhetoric is consistently strong. They talk about the inevitability of unification. They label Taiwanese leaders who resist their vision as dangerous separatists and portray them as enemies of the entire Chinese nation.
And refusing to talk doesn't help either.
No. Cutting off official communication channels with Taiwan's government, which Beijing did unilaterally back in 2016 after President Tsai Ing-wen of the DPP took office and refused to accept the 1992 consensus as a precondition for dialogue. That's another tactic of political coercion.
How does that work?
It removes avenues for a routine dialogue, puts pressure on Taiwan to concede to Beijing's political terms just to get talks going again, and, perhaps most dangerously, it significantly increases the risk of miscalculation during a crisis because there are fewer established lines of communication to de-escalate tensions.
So they actually increase the risk of accidental conflict by refusing to talk. That seems counterintuitive.
It is, but it's a form of pressure. And finally, there's the whole concept of gray zone warfare, which we touched on with the incursions.
Remind us what that is again?
It refers to all those coercive actions that fall below the threshold of conventional warfare. So the constant military presence and drills, the cyber attacks, the information operations, the economic pressure, all these tactics designed to wear down Taiwan's resources, its morale, and its will to resist over time, without triggering a full-scale military conflict that would likely draw in international partners like the US or Japan.
A persistent, grinding, low-level conflict designed to exhaust Taiwan into submission.
That seems to be the strategy. And as a final point here, they react very strongly, often aggressively, to any perceived signs of international support for Taiwan, especially from the United States.
We saw that with Pelosi's visit.
Exactly. Visits by high-profile U.S. officials, like Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit in 2022, were met with massive, unprecedented military exercises encircling Taiwan. They consistently protest U.S. arms sales to Taiwan, even though those are defensive, and issue strong warnings against any actions or even statements they view as supporting Taiwan's separate status or international participation.
So any external recognition or validation of Taiwan's autonomy or its democratic system triggers a really strong reaction from Beijing, which, again, maybe reinforces that core insecurity about its status and the example it sets.
It certainly underscores their determination to control the narrative, isolate Taiwan internationally, and prevent any strengthening of its separate identity.
Wow. That is a comprehensive and, frankly, relentless set of pressures. Military, information, cyber, economic, diplomatic, legal, gray zone. It sounds like an absolutely exhausting daily reality for Taiwan.
It's designed to be exhausting. It's a strategy of attrition in many ways.
Okay, but despite all these multifaceted pressures, the information we looked at suggests Taiwan has shown really significant resilience in defending its democratic system. How are they pushing back against all this?
They are pushing back, absolutely. Taiwan has implemented pretty robust national security strategies and defense measures. Recent initiatives, like those outlined in President Lai Ching-te's proposed 17 defense measures, show a comprehensive approach is being taken.
What kind of measures are included in those plans? What are they focusing on?
Well, they seem to encompass a range of things. Steps like potentially restoring military trials for certain serious offenses related to national security, like espionage, implementing stricter vetting processes for public officials, and even, interestingly, religious figures who might have questionable or opaque ties to mainland China.
Trying to guard against infiltration.
Exactly. And critically, there's a strong emphasis on building societal resilience, particularly through measures like promoting media literacy among the general population. This media literacy is seen as a crucial defense against the constant barrage of disinformation campaigns we just talked about.
So strengthening not just physical defenses, but also the integrity of their government institutions and the public's ability to actually resist manipulation. That makes sense.
It's a layered defense strategy. And perhaps the most powerful indicator of Taiwan's resilience, honestly, is public opinion. Sentiment in Taiwan remains overwhelmingly in favor of maintaining their autonomy and their democratic way of life, despite all the pressure.
Really? What do the recent polls actually indicate about that public sentiment?
Well, polls from April 2025, for instance, provide a pretty clear picture. A very high percentage of the population, specifically 73.7%, expressed concern that CCP infiltration efforts are becoming increasingly severe.
So they're aware of the threat.
Highly aware. That indicates a high level of public consciousness about the challenge they face. And crucially, there's overwhelming consensus around 80% on the idea that the Republic of China, Taiwan, and the People's Republic of China, mainland, are not subordinate to each other. They see themselves as distinct political entities.
80%, that's huge.
It is. And an even higher percentage, 85.8%, believe that Taiwan's future should be decided solely by its own 23 million people.
Wow. Those numbers are incredibly strong, especially given the constant pressure. They show a population that is not only aware of the threat, but deeply committed to their self-determination and their democratic system.
They really underscore the fundamental challenge Beijing faces. You can exert pressure, but it's very hard to win over a population that sees and deeply values its distinct identity and its freedoms.
And the democratic system itself helps.
Absolutely. Taiwan's democratic system itself provides mechanisms for resilience through citizen action. The ability for citizens to engage in things like recall campaigns against elected officials they perceive as being too close to Beijing, or acting against Taiwan's interests, for example, that allows citizens to use democratic tools to protect their system from within.
Using the tools of democracy to safeguard democracy from perceived external influence. Makes sense.
Precisely. There's also a strong societal focus, often driven by civil society groups and the media, on openly exposing and scrutinizing behavior by officials or public figures that's deemed inappropriately aligned with Beijing's interests. Transparency and public scrutiny become forms of defense in an open society.
Holding people accountable.
Exactly. And then there's the ongoing effort to strengthen democratic values from the ground up. Investing in media literacy education in schools and for adults, fostering social dialogue through community forums, encouraging citizen participation in local governance and oversight mechanisms. All these things reinforce the value and the strength of their democratic institutions, making the population inherently more resistant to external pressure and manipulation.
So Taiwan's resilience isn't just one thing. It's a combination of government strategy, really robust public opinion, and the inherent strength of an open, democratic society that allows for citizen action, awareness, and accountability.
It really is. Their democratic system isn't just the thing that Beijing apparently fears the most. It's also proving to be their primary tool of defense against attempts to undermine it.
Okay, now let's bring this back full circle. Let's connect that core idea, China's deep-seated insecurity about Taiwan's democracy, and link it to something else we discussed briefly. China's notable prowess in what's been described as face engineering.
Ah, yes. Face engineering. This is where that internal need to project strength and success directly collides with the challenge that Taiwan represents. China is often described, sometimes admiringly, sometimes critically, as a world-class master of this.
What exactly is face engineering in this context?
It's essentially the use of massive projects, carefully curated or sometimes exaggerated data, and tightly controlled propaganda to project a specific image, both domestically to their own people and internationally to the world. An image of being powerful, advanced, efficient, and flawlessly successful.
It's about creating and maintaining a powerful national brand image almost. Like corporate branding, but on a national scale.
Exactly. Think of the really visible stuff. The enormous high-speed rail network built incredibly quickly, the rapidly growing skylines of glaring skyscrapers in cities across the country, ambitious global projects like the Belt and Road Initiative.
Things that look impressive.
Exactly. These are often built not just for their practical utility, but as tangible symbols of China's rapid rise, its technological capability, and the supposed superiority of its political and economic system in delivering rapid development. They're designed to impress, to awe, and to convey an image of unstoppable progress under the CCP's leadership.
But what's often reported as the reality behind that impressive facade, does the substance always match the image?
Well, that's where the engineering part comes in and where critiques arise. While the projects are undoubtedly real and often visually impressive, the information we reviewed also points to significant downsides and inefficiencies that can stem from this intense focus on image over, perhaps, sustainable substance.
Such as?
We see reports of massive debt burdens incurred by local governments and state-owned enterprises to finance these huge infrastructure projects. Sometimes there are questions about the actual economic viability, with reports of low usage rates on certain high-speed rail lines or in newly built urban districts, those areas sometimes dubbed ghost cities because they remain largely uninhabited.
So, built for show, maybe, rather than actual demand.
That's the criticism sometimes. You also see reports of high vacancy rates in many of the gleaming new skyscrapers. And there are persistent concerns about quality control issues, sometimes referred to by the term tofu dreg projects, where structures are built very quickly for show, but maybe lack durability or safety standards, leading to problems later on, like bridges collapsing or buildings facing serious structural issues.
So, the emphasis is often on looking good, projecting strength and modernity, even if the underlying economic reality or the quality might be less robust than the image suggests.
Precisely. And even the Belt and Road Initiative, while presented as a grand vision of win-win global cooperation, has faced criticism. It's led to significant debt burdens for some partner countries, raising concerns about debt trap diplomacy. The Hambantota port in Sri Lanka is often cited as an example, where Sri Lanka eventually had to lease the port to a Chinese company for 99 years because it couldn't repay the loans.
Okay, so China puts immense effort and resources into projecting this image of strength, success, and the superiority of its system through this face engineering. How does Taiwan's existence complicate this whole project?
This is where that core fear we've been discussing ties in so directly. The CCP needs to control the narrative, both for its own people and for the rest of the world, about what China represents and what a successful Chinese society looks like. They invest vast resources in this face engineering, building the impressive infrastructure, pushing narratives of national strength and rejuvenation achieved under their leadership.
Okay.
But the very existence of Taiwan fundamentally challenges that carefully constructed image.
How so? Because Taiwan offers a competing definition of what a successful Chinese society can be.
Exactly. Taiwan is a society that shares cultural roots, language, and history with the mainland. but it has achieved significant economic prosperity and political freedom without the CCP's authoritarian model. And crucially, it hasn't needed the same kind of massive, sometimes inefficient face-saving projects to prove its worth or legitimacy.
Its success comes from a different source.
Right. Its success under democracy is a tangible, real-world counterexample to the CCP's central claim that only their system can provide prosperity and stability for Chinese people. Taiwan exists as living proof that people of Chinese heritage can build a successful, modern, free society based on entirely different principles. And that directly feeds into Beijing's insecurity, the fear of comparison, that perceived democratic flu we talked about.
So, Taiwan's success under democracy is basically an inconvenient truth that undermines the CCP's narrative of indispensability.
It really is. It makes their elaborate face engineering job much, much harder because there's this vibrant, successful counter-narrative happening right across the water, visible to anyone who can access uncensored information. It's like they're building this incredibly elaborate stage set, trying to convince everyone their play is the only reality, and Taiwan is just offstage, living a real, open, successful life, reminding anyone who looks that there's a compelling alternative.
It makes the engineered reality look less convincing.
Exactly. And think about those humorous points mentioned earlier. By age, the CCP is like the later renter trying to kick out the original owner when it comes to historical legitimacy claims over the ROC framework. And regarding freedom, if the mainland population was truly as happy and content as the official propaganda suggests, why would so many millions need VPNs to bypass the Great Firewall and access information from the outside world, including information about Taiwan?
Good point.
These points just highlight the underlying insecurity that seems to necessitate both the elaborate face engineering within China and the aggressive, multifaceted efforts to control, undermine, or ultimately absorb Taiwan.
It really seems the greatest threat Taiwan poses is simply by being itself a successful, visible, democratic alternative.
That seems to be the perspective that's powerfully illuminated by the information we've reviewed today. It adds a crucial dimension to understanding Beijing's motivations.
So looking at all this information together, it becomes incredibly clear that China's complex pursuit of Taiwan is indeed driven by a tangled web of motivations. You've got the historical narrative, the need to complete the Civil War legacy, and cement legitimacy.
Yep, that's foundational.
Then there's the critical geostrategic location, breaking out of the first island chain, projecting power.
Undeniably important for their military and geopolitical goals.
The immense economic and technological prize, especially Taiwan's world-leading semiconductor industry.
A huge factor, especially in the current tech competition.
And of course, the domestic political utility, using Taiwan to rally nationalism, distract from internal issues, and consolidate the CCP's power.
All of these factors are significant and clearly play a role in Beijing's calculations and its actions. We see evidence for all of them.
But that idea, the one highlighted by our listeners' insight, that the CCP's deepest, perhaps most existential fear isn't just about regaining territory or settling historical scores,
but about the success and the sheer magnetic influence of Taiwan's vibrant democracy.
Exactly. The potential for that democratic sample effect, or flu, to spread and challenge their own authoritarian rule from within that idea is really strongly supported by the information we've discussed. It seems to be a crucial, perhaps even the most fundamental part of the picture. It helps explain the intensity, the urgency, and the specific nature of Beijing's actions towards Taiwan, particularly the focus on undermining its democratic institutions.
It adds that layer of ideological urgency, doesn't it? Something that transcends the more pragmatic motivations of territory or resources. Taiwan's continued existence as a free and democratic society truly does appear to be a significant and persistent thorn in the side for the CCP.
Because it challenges them on so many levels.
On multiple fundamental levels. It challenges their legitimacy, their historical narrative, their carefully engineered image of success, and their control over the fundamental narrative of what it means to be Chinese and how Chinese people should be governed in the 21st century.
So it seems less about conquering land, ultimately, and maybe more about suppressing an inconvenient, powerful idea represented by that land and its people.
Precisely. Taiwan offers a compelling alternative answer to the question of how a modern Chinese society can thrive simply by being itself. And that alternative seems deeply threatening to the CCP's hold on power.
Ultimately, this deep dive into the complex reasons behind China's pursuit of Taiwan, particularly looking through the lens of this critical insight about the fear of democracy, leaves us with a really powerful thought to consider, doesn't it?
What's that?
In a world that's increasingly grappling with competing political systems and ideologies, is the greatest threat to a powerful authoritarian regime. Not necessarily external military force or economic sanctions, but maybe the quiet, persistent power of a successful, free society just across the water. A society offering a living, breathing example of what could be.
That's a profound question, and one that seems more relevant than ever in today's world. A lot to think about there.
Well, thank you for joining us. These are just some of the incredible, challenging ideas people are wrestling with. So keep thinking about these questions, because they're definitely not going away anytime soon.
Absolutely. Thanks for the great chat.
And hey, if you enjoyed exploring complex ideas like this, getting into the weeds a bit, you might also find some fascinating and fun stuff to explore with our friend Mickey. Mickey has a YouTube channel called Mickey to Life.
Yeah, Mickey's channel.
It's got fun memes, music, drinks.
We've promoted it about 100 times.
Travel vlogs.
Maybe another 100 to
Lots
go.
of great content over there that just might spark your curiosity in different ways. Definitely worth checking out.
Highly recommended. Goodbye for now. Take care.